Today's topic is going to be personalities. I frame a lot of things around personality types and styles of behavior. Just this past weekend, I was helping a friend of mine move, and I was joking with a couple of the other people that were helping that this is what it's like to move a melancholy. And I don't use the word melancholy in any sort of derogatory way. It's just in the personality study that I've learned from. There are 4 personality quadrants, which are labeled for the sake of identification: choleric, melancholy, phlegmatic, and sanguine. And it is a really empowering thing to be able to identify where some of our quirks come from, where some of our driving behaviors come from, because then we can look outside of just a person's behaviors and mannerisms, and we can see that this behavior pattern in somebody that's close to us, or that we're working with, whether it's a friend, a family member, or a client. We can identify where these things come from, and we can separate ourselves from taking anything personally, because when we know it's their default behavior style, that has such a different energy to it than anything else. For now, I just want to give you some quick summaries, kind of off the cuff, so that you can have a little bit more of a framework for personalities, because I'm sure it'll come up quite a bit in our conversations. So the personality study that I am a student of is a study that characterizes people into 4 different quadrants. Those quadrants being the choleric, melancholy, phlegmatic, and sanguine. There's a lot of different personality studies out there, and they're all relevant in their own way. The one that this particular information comes from was established in about 460 BC by Hippocrates of Kos, who was a Greek philosopher. And his original thought was that a person's dominant characteristics came from the majority of the type of fluid that they had in their body. So if you do any checking on Wikipedia or anything like that, you'll probably run across that study. So this is a really, long-standing way of looking at people's behavior patterns. And it's about maybe default behavior patterns, because we can all alter our behavior depending on the environment that we're in, the situation, even the people in our lives. We alter some of our personalities based on our surroundings and getting along with those that are closest to us, which is perfectly fine. It's perfectly okay. Taking a look at the personalities is a great thing to do for understanding your view with the world, how other people in your life view their worlds. And then when we take it a step further into entrepreneurship and into business, it helps us to understand the people that we are doing business with. It helps us understand how to market to people, what drives people, what's the motivation for buying decisions, how can we best present and communicate our information so that other people will receive it well. So there's just a whole boatload of reasons why it's important to pay attention to this. Personalities and the study of people and their personalities has been on my radar for quite some time now. I really have to say, though, that the most impactful piece of this for me was when I could look at my children and when I could understand what was driving them and motivating them, and how they were different than me and how they were similar to me, all at the same time. I think as parents, especially, sometimes, we each have our own parenting style, and we try to help prepare our children as best we can for the lives that they're going to lead. And they don't come with a guidebook, of course. So all we know, all we have, the tools that we have to do this are what we personally know, our personal knowledge. And we could look at the world and we could say that this is the way that it is, and everybody is going to interpret the world in the same way that I see the world. And when you understand personalities, you learn that that's just not the case. Something can happen and it is perceived in four completely different ways. So the personality study really hit home for me when it came to understanding my children, because I do have a daughter who is very much like me and very similar in personality characteristics. And my son is the complete and polar opposite of me in terms of personality. So now that I know what I do know as a result of studying this for quite a while to gain a better sense of perspective about the whole thing, since I've studied this and since I've become aware that I can pay attention to what he's doing, it's really allowed me to interpret things in a whole new way. So hopefully a little bit of what I share with you about personalities will be helpful to you in your life, and then we'll just take it from there. So here is the 5-minute version of personality studies. Like I said, there's a lot of different ones out there. The one that I'll be talking about does have its origins in ancient Greece from Hippocrates, and it does identify the 4 quadrants as choleric, melancholy, phlegmatic, and sanguine. So the easiest way to explain this was actually shared by my business partner. He tells a great story, so I am going to borrow that here and share it with you. To look at the 4 personality types, if there were 4 people walking down the road and they came upon a house that was on fire, the first personality would say, you go call the fire department. You find the buckets, get the water, see if anybody's in the house. They would take control and start directing people around. The second personality would reach into their pocket protector and pull out their calculator, where they would start to do the math at 3,000 gallons per minute times, then we'll be able to put the fire out in X amount of time. And they will have all the precise calculations, and then they'll probably start analyzing the best route to get the water, and yeah, you know how that goes. The third personality will look at the first 2 and say, what can I do to help? Tell me what you need me to do. And you could point them in the direction of the burning house to go check for people, and they would just march right in. They are loyal, they will take direction, and they're looking for, peaceful resolution to all problems, and they're just wanting to help. The fourth personality, look at the fire, say, woohoo, look at the marshmallows, there's a house that's on fire. There I was looking for a good time and not afraid to have a little bit of fun. So those 4 personality types, they would correspond: the driver, the direct personality, the one who takes charge and starts to direct other people around, that's the choleric. The analytic, the person who would grab the calculator and start to make all the figures and analyze the best routes, that would be melancholy. We use the word melancholy not in terms of happy or sad, although the melancholy personality, the one that is so analytic and has the great grasp of rhythm and numbers, a lot of the great artists and musicians are actually melancholy in their dominant personality, which allows them to have such a handle on those patterns that make music and different ways of seeing the world to make art. And a lot of artists and musicians are known for some of their best work during what we could coin as their blue period, because in terms of their emotional cycle, a melancholy is going to have a long, sloping, kind of up and down. And when they go up, they're pretty well up. And then it's a long ride down until they, maybe do hit that blue period a little bit in their lives. Some of their most creative work comes from being in that space. The third personality, the one that says, tell me what you want me to do. I'll just, I'll help out any way that I can. The loyal, that's the phlegmatic. And then the fourth personality, woohoo, get the marshmallows. That's the one who's a sanguine. So I like to use the personality study not to classify or label people, but so that we can understand people better and create better ways of communicating and understanding. If things happen, and I could use my son as an example, who's the polar opposite of me. My personality dominant type is usually a choleric, followed by either sanguine if I'm in a networking, kind of take charge situation, or maybe a little melancholy phlegmatic if it's something a little bit more low key. So my son, who's the exact opposite, is primarily phlegmatic, almost off the charts phlegmatic, with melancholy. So if our house were on fire, he would stop to tie his shoes. And he wouldn't really kind of understand what the rush was about. So when we can look at the different personalities and we can understand that any situation is going to result in seeing this from so many different perspectives, depending on what your dominant and secondary personality traits are, it just creates a really nice way for us to understand the world and, not take offense to things that normally would offend us and be more patient with others. And sometimes, if you're in a situation and maybe something happens and it starts to engage your ego and you get a little bit frustrated, it creates some objectivity when you can back up from that situation and say, I understand why they're taking it this way. I get it. I get that their processing is that they have to go through A and B and C. And I get that I start at C and I go C to B to A. So it creates this new avenue where we can begin to relate to each other in much, much more effective ways. So I want to hit on just a couple positive, really super positive traits for each of these personality types. And then I do want to also mention some of those opportunities for growth, because we as people do have all of these personality types within us. We're typically a mix of the four, and depending on which we kind of default to, that's going to be what our primary and secondary traits are. Under stressful situations, an interesting thing happens because if we do have all these, pieces of four different personality types within us, typically under normal circumstances, we're going to have our primary drivers, and that's how we're going to just go through our life. If you're a choleric, you're going to be direct and to the point. You're going to be blunt, taking charge, making things happen. And then your secondary characteristic will come into play, and then your third. When you're under stress or things in your life are even more challenging for you than they would normally be, what people do unconsciously a lot of the time is we try our default characteristic. And if that doesn't work, then we deploy the secondary. And if that doesn't work, we go to the third. And if our last ditch effort to relieve the stress in our life or to change the situation, if our last ditch effort is the last smallest amount of personality trait that we have, that's where we kind of dig our heels in because we have no other options. If this doesn't help me get out of whatever this is or succeed, then there's just, I don't even know what else I would do. So when people are under extreme stress, you will actually see personality shifts. Not because they're consciously making a decision to shift their personality, but because A and B and C haven't worked, all I've got left is D. I better make this happen. So keep that in mind, and if you start to notice some of those things in people around you, you can really help make a difference by understanding those and really helping them understand a little bit more about what's going on in themselves. So positive characteristics for each of the personalities, and I will start with the sanguine. The sanguine personality is outgoing, life of the party. Typically they hit a room, they'll be chatty when they get there, they want to engage, they want to have a great time with a lot of people. If you want to have a fun party, invite the sanguines because they will make it all about them, but they'll also make it pretty exciting. Sanguines also have less of a need for personal space than the other personalities, especially in comparison to the melancholy. So if you are a sanguine, you want to make sure that you are honoring people's boundaries, and whatever a normal like personal bubble, personal distance space would be for you, you probably want to double that because that might be somebody else's almost comfortable zone. Sanguines are often the popular ones. They like the enthusiasm and the excitement. They like encouraging and uplifting others, and most of all, it's about fun. So you want to make sure that if you're living or working with a sanguine and you notice that they're not as happy or bubbly or upbeat as they normally are, there's probably something going on, whether it's in the environment or the way that they're thinking, that you can help them. When we help each other bring joy into our lives, we're actually helping to feed that part of the personality that helps to make that happen. So then let's talk about the phlegmatic personality. One of the best traits about a phlegmatic personality is that they are so loyal. Once someone that is phlegmatic is on your team or on your side, they will be loyal. They are the long distance runners also, where other people like the sanguine might get a little busy, maybe they forget about things. The phlegmatic is not necessarily going to be the starter, but they will be the finisher. They're in it for the long haul. A word of caution, if there are people in your life that you know who are phlegmatic, they are very, very loyal, but they also have a switch inside of them, and that switch would be the loyalty turn-off switch. If you've got a relationship with a phlegmatic, whether it's a client relationship, employer-employee, or a personal relationship, if something happens where that phlegmatic, the primary personality of the phlegmatic is called up in front of a crowd, or kind of attention is brought to them in a not so good way, meaning maybe they feel embarrassed, or maybe they feel something significant almost happens where they feel they just don't feel comfortable in that. There is a point of no return with a phlegmatic where that switch will flip, and where there was once a loyal part of the team, if you've embarrassed them or if you've called them out on something, that switch, once it flips, they're done. And there's really not much that you can do to recover from that. So, they're really, really peaceful until you kind of get their back against the wall, and then things could change. Phlegmatics are excellent at staying calm and make great mediators. They see both sides of the story. They don't have to rush to judgment like the choleric does. Great listeners. They like to make sure that everybody is having a good time, so they're very relaxed and comfortable peace seekers. Very, very genuine as well. One of the major things that a phlegmatic needs versus the sanguine needs people, needs excitement, needs, activity. Phlegmatic really likes that peace and quiet time, so that's something definitely to honor in that personality. Melancholy. Let's talk about melancholies. One of my favorite personality types for a number of reasons. One of which is that a melancholy personality, especially the ones who really like spreadsheets, think that the entire world can be organized on an Excel spreadsheet. This is really awesome, unless you don't like details or spreadsheets, which cholerics mostly don't like details and spreadsheets. So I think that we're really, really glad that there are people in this world who do. So melancholies are the analytic. They're great at paying attention to detail, explaining things, doing things in the right way. They don't want to buck the system, although they might analyze the system. Excellent with numbers and charts and graphs. Pretty sensitive and pretty intuitive to the needs of other people. And they are very articulate. Typically, a melancholy is going to pay close attention to spelling and grammar. And if things like that are off base, whether it's in emails or on websites, a melancholy is the personality that's going to go through your website and send you every single page where you have spelling errors and the proper way to correct that. So, that's a great and awesome gift to be giving the world. We need more of that. There are a lot of, of course, in my life, I come across a lot of people in a lot of different avenues, whether it's entrepreneurship, small business, and a lot of different things. And the ones that are closest to me, especially that fall into the melancholy category, know that if you ever say, oh, come into this room and look on the whiteboard and look at the diagram that I've drawn you, they kind of know that that's not my favorite thing. But when we understand, and when I understand that other people have different personality characteristics that, are strong needs in them, then I know to kind of meet halfway and take the time to look at the diagram on the whiteboard And then in turn, the melancholies know that I really don't need all those details. So, we come to a happy place instead of one where it's lopsided and we just don't understand each other. So last but not least, let's talk about the choleric personality and some of the pluses. The choleric personality is great at kind of taking charge, making quick decisions, not letting a lot of things kind of hold them up. They give quick and clear instruction. However, in the haste to give quick and clear instruction, sometimes they don't take the time to make sure that they understand that everybody else understands. A choleric, in their desire to get things done, can often kind of run over people in the process, because if a choleric says, maybe I'd like you to file this report or make this phone call, it doesn't mean sometime later next week when you feel like it. It means I wanted it done already. So, that's one of those maybe impatient, urgent kind of a thing that the choleric has as a default characteristic that really none of the other personalities have. So again, whether you are a choleric or you are any of the other personalities and you're in a situation with a choleric, the choleric needs to know to give clear instructions with clearly defined deadlines and make sure that it's being communicated properly. And then the other personalities, the sanguine needs to kind of pay attention to that. Phlegmatic is just going to be loyal and get it done. And the melancholy is going to need to know, that we've got to buffer the details and make sure that we kind of wrap this around getting the task done. So there's lots of effective ways that these personalities can work together. And of course, if you don't understand this, and if you do understand it, but the person on the other side of the equation doesn't understand it, it can make for some not so awesome interactions. It's really, really cool. And if you do more reading up on the subject, a book that I would recommend is Personality Plus by Florence Littauer. That's kind of a really common sense guide to the 4 personality types. As I've kind of talked about here, it's a great guide. If you do a little bit more reading and understanding of this, then as situations come up in your life, you'll be able to look at them and analyze it in a little bit more objective way. I probably a dozen times a week end up having a conversation with someone, or I look at some situation and I say, well, wow, where did that come from? Or why did that happen? And then if I think about it and I say, oh, okay, so I understand that this person is coming from this perspective, and here's their default personality, whether they know it or not. This is where they take their cues for behavior from. This is completely why they're doing it, and I get it. So then I can make the decision of, maybe I'll change something on my end so that we can communicate better, or in some cases, depending on what's going on, maybe I'll even bring that to attention. Say, I realize that you and I aren't quite seeing the same thing on this, and here's where I'm coming from, here's what's important to me, and then I'm guessing that this is where you're coming from, but why don't you tell me a little bit more? So it's a great way to kind of wrap that whole discussion together. So I felt that it was important to give you this discussion of personalities tonight just a little bit, because it does play such a huge part in everything that we do. And I don't think that we're introduced to the personalities early enough, or I guess maybe pay attention to it enough, or maybe it was just me. Maybe I just missed, personality understanding day in life until I was ready for it, which, that happens sometimes too. So anyway, it was important to me, so I felt that it was important to you. And I would encourage you to explore a little bit more about the personalities, maybe figure out where you fall into those quadrants, look at some of your awesome traits and look at some of your not so awesome traits, and see how you can blend them to make your world a better place. It's kind of funny. I had recorded the other personality segment earlier, and it didn't feel quite right to me. And then my choleric personality's default would say, oh, just go ahead and release it anyway, because I'm not perfect, and it's just what came to mind, and it's what I had to say. And it was a little too, I don't know, it was a little too haphazard for me the way that I put it together. And it didn't come across as, positive as I would have liked it to. So, Choleric is also overly critical. And yes, I am working on that each and every day to make sure that I make my world a better place. So, on that note, until next time.